is the drama wasn't limited to the stage. I don't think any of us knew exactly what we were doing. The basement cocoon we've created gave us a foundation to try anything, do anything, become anything, and the freedom of the space allowed us to ultimately to glimpse the world through a wider lens. All of us were committed to becoming better at what we were doing. And we often mixed and mingled our directing and performing, directing one play, acting in the next, sometimes doing both. In those early days, we didn't talk about going to Hollywood or New York or be in the movies. We wanted to do our own thing there in Chicagoland. And I think by being there in the basement, isolated, we developed the chip on our shoulder necessary to survive. We felt like we had a lot of emerging talent, and we wanted our work to feel real and raw and fearless. And we worked hard to keep it deeply rooted in the sheer grit that we had on stage together. Whether it was true or not, we needed to somehow believe our work was different, unique, special. It would take some time and effort before anyone tried to branch out beyond our city. But I think those early days, we all felt like we were getting better and stronger and more confident as artists, and the sky could be the limit eventually. What I know today is that our theater benefited from a larger institution, the United States of America. The country of our birth allowed us any number of freedoms that we subconsciously used and enjoyed and benefited from, even though we didn't realize it. We had freedom of speech at Steppenwolf. We could express our thoughts and ideas about anything in public or private. The people around us might disagree or debate or push back, but when they thought we were being stupid, but by no means were we ever stifled in what we said or thought. We exercised freedom to assemble. We used a sort of freedom of religion, although nothing we did was religious, which was a freedom all its own. No one forced us to dress a certain way or talk a certain way because of their beliefs. We were free to live or travel anywhere we wanted, and we were free to work any job we wanted. So we played in bands and created our own theater and worked in sewers where we found baby raccoons. We were free to educate ourselves by any means possible, formal or practical, and all this freedom led to something. It allowed us to create and innovate. It allowed us to dream big. Gratefully, it allowed us to be us. Awesome.
The baby raccoons thing, that's a reference to a job that one of our buddies had. Because we all worked in those early days that I'm describing there, everyone worked day jobs.
Yeah, right.
And then we would go to the theater. We had this little basement of a Catholic school that it was a closed down Catholic school. And they had a basement there that they had used for a teen center. And a guy at the Chamber of Commerce, I went to the Chamber of Commerce and I said, "Do you know any place that kids could make a theater?" And he said, "Well, sure. Let's go over here to this basement in the Catholic school." And it was perfect. And we built an 88-seat theater in there. So we were in there in this basement, but we weren't making any money. I mean, we were just trying to get people to come see the shows for whatever. And so everybody had day jobs. And, the raccoon, the guy worked in the sewer. He was actually, kind of a technical guy, never did any acting with the company. But I worked on the loading dock at Neiman Marcus, unpacking boxes and, kind of the shipping clerk type stuff. Malkovich was in that first summer, he was a school bus driver for a summer camp. So
that's a movie in its own right.
I always worry about those children. Did they turn out all right? And everybody had different jobs, that we worked in the day, and we would go to the theater at night and work into the wee hours in the morning. Then everybody go home, get up, go to their job, go back to the theater at night, and that's how we did it in those early days.
And the thing that I think is, when you say like you guys weren't thinking about New York, you weren't thinking about Hollywood, you were just thinking about just doing this thing as to the best of your ability.
Yeah, I think the founders of the theater, two of the guys, Jeff Perry and Terry Kinney, they met each other at Illinois State University. Jeff Perry, as I mentioned, was in West Side Story with me, and we became best friends. And then he went to college, and I went back to high school. And he met Terry Kinney, and they became best friends. Another great actor, and so the three of us kind of galvanized our plans to start the theater company and to get the theater company going. And then and Malkovich went to Illinois State University, Moira Harris, all those other people that you mentioned there in the original group went to Illinois State, and then they all moved up to Highland Park, which is where I found the basement of the Catholic school, and we started doing plays in there.
Continue on here a little bit forward, but back to the book. Moira and I got together as a couple a year after the Vietnam War ended in 1975, and I started to meet her family members who had served in the U.S. Army. Moira's brother, Arthur Harris, was a helicopter pilot, having flown 800 combat hours in Vietnam. Moira's oldest brother, Boyd McCanna, am I saying that right? Mac Harris, had been to Vietnam twice, first as a lieutenant and platoon leader, and second as a captain and company commander. He'd received the Silver Star for gallantry in combat. Moira's sister, Amy, went through ROTC in college and went into the Army herself after graduation. She met and married a great guy, Jack Treese, who served as a combat medic with the 101st Airborne Division in Vietnam. Jack earned 2 Bronze Stars and 2 Purple Hearts. When Arthur came home from Vietnam, he withdrew from things, and I would see him only on rare occasions when Moira and I would visit her mother. But from time to time, Mac, Jack, and Amy came to visit us in Chicago and would see our plays. I didn't spend a ton of time with these veterans at first, but anytime we got together, we talked about deeper matters. And as I slowly learned more and more about the people who protected our freedoms, I began to look for ways to give back. In 1976 and 1977, Mac came to see a few of our basement plays whenever he was on leave from assignment as a tactical officer at West Point. I was a pretty ragged kid then, with torn-up jeans and a T-shirt and lots of hair. He was spit-shined, strong as Atlas, and had a deep, powerful voice. "Gary, what are your goals?" Mac asked me one day after a show. He wasn't grilling me. I sensed kindness within his roughness. He was interested in other people's lives and genuinely wanted to know about my goals, but I wasn't sure if he was asking about my goals in life or my designs on his sister. Possibly he wanted to know where we wanted to go as a theater company. So I described my goals for Steppenwolf and how I wanted it to make it as big as possible. We had a conversation, a real conversation. This elite former company commander and me, a long-haired American 20-year-old with big dreams of all things, we connected on the subject of leadership. In high school, at the height of the war, I'd been oblivious to so much of what was happening in Vietnam. Yet in the early years of Steppenwolf, I began to form genuine friendships with these military veterans. They began to open my eyes so much more. I knew the war hadn't gone well. I remembered casualty reports on the news and knew the reports were grim. But now I was meeting actual veterans who lived there, served there, fought there. And I knew that many of the Vietnam veterans who'd returned home hadn't been honored for their service. I didn't know what to do yet about this, if anything. But I felt something stirring inside of me. Honor needed to be granted. Respect was due. A simple thanks needed to be said. It would take a few years before I figured out any sort of next step. But in the meantime, I had a theater and Moira's family members, and I knew something in our country desperately needed to change. I would start where I could, with Steppenwolf. And without being able to articulate it in this way yet, I would begin to do my part to give back. So what I really liked about that, not to say that I'm any thing close to a guy like Mac, but when I meet people, right? Like I'll meet, some friend of my daughter's or some friend of my sister's, some people that are whatever. They're clearly pretty close to, a long-haired Gary Sinise in 1975 or whatever. And I can feel that they're looking at me thinking there's some stereotypical image of what I'm going to be like, right? And I'll just have a genuine conversation with them because I am genuine. Like, oh, so what do you do? So where are you heading in life? And I think it's like the same way you said, hey, this was what'd you call him? This elite former company commander, and you're having a normal conversation with him, and there's like a revelation that, oh, this guy's a person. This guy's just a person that, yeah, he's got spit shine and yeah, he's got a high and tight, but he's just a person. And he's going to come and watch our freaking crazy plays in our theater, which which the plays are kind of crazy. Some of them are really crazy. I forget. Is the one where everyone's naked on stage yet? Has that one happened yet at this point?
That's a little bit later.
Yeah, that was. One of the plays that you guys do is about, what are they, native Peruvians? Is it Peruvians? What country?
Yeah, down in South America, and it's a small tribe living, very remote in a very remote area of the jungle.
So you guys put 25 actors on stage naked.
Don't blame it on me. I did. This was Malkovich's idea.
So Malkovich decides 25. And you know what? Actually, when I heard that, I was like, okay, you know what? I get it. That they're trying to, break down some barriers. But then what got me was you go into the details of that, the fact that this place is really small, it's hot, and all of a sudden you're sitting in a small room, and there's only 88 seats. So you got 88 people in the bleachers or whatever in the seats, and there's 30 people naked on stage. You're almost outnumbered by sweaty, naked people.
It wasn't the biggest hit,
hit
of our early days.
But I could see Mac rolling in there from West Point going, what is my sister doing?
Yeah, no, he didn't see that one.
Thankfully.
Thankfully, he didn't see that one.
So, were you gonna? Did I cut you off?
No. Mac was an interesting guy. Let me just talk about it. He passed away in 1983 of cancer, and but he made a very big impression on me. As I'd never met anyone like him before. As I said, I had veterans in my own family, but I never really met, West Point graduate, two-tour Vietnam veteran. In fact, General Vince Brooks.
I know. I don't know him, but
General Mike Scaparrotti, right? These are two. They're newly retired, but they're friends of mine, and I met them. I met Mike when he was a 2-star, and I met Vince when he was a 1-star. They both went on to earn 4 stars. They retired. Their final jobs. Vince's last assignment was running Korea, and Scaparotti's was the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, right? So both of these guys were at West Point when Mac was there. And that's why I'm close with them, because when I met them earlier on in their stardom, they said they went to West Point. And I said, well, did you happen to know Mac Harris? And both of them, when I met each of them, their faces lit up, and they started gushing about my brother-in-law and how much of an influence he had on them when he was a TAC officer at West Point. So he was a really significant guy. They actually, just about 4 years ago, 2016, they inducted Mac, and this is 30 years after his death, into the Fort Leavenworth Hall of Fame. And, Omar Bradley and General Patton, all those kind of people are in the Fort Leavenworth Hall of Fame, because he revolutionized some things in the Army back in the day, back in 1976, 77, and into 81, 82, 83, when his final assignment was at Leavenworth, where he rewrote the leadership manual. And that manual is still taught today, and principles that he championed and he came up with. And so they thought it was a significant contribution to today's Army, so they put him in the Fort Leavenworth Hall of Fame. And this is the guy who came, and I was a little bit scared of him and everything, but then I got to know him, and he was a lovely, lovely guy, just unlike anyone I'd ever met, and he made a big impression on me. And I went to his funeral. I went to his military funeral when he died in 1983, and that was very, very powerful. And so when 10 years later, when I started working with our wounded and getting more involved and everything like that, all those memories of spending time with this particular individual came flooding back in some pretty significant ways, and that's why I write about him in the book.
Well, I mentioned to Echo Charles before we started recording, before you got here today. So you're going to see some layers today, because Echo likes to talk about layers, the way things are connected, and we often infuse layers intentionally into things. But we do podcasts about military stuff, and we've covered dozens of military manuals on this podcast. And I think podcast 170